Yo, just a disclaimer. This podcast is meant for informational purposes only. We are not financial advisors, so please do your own research.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Another episode of Going Deep with myself and my co-host Vernon Wells. It's a beautiful Monday here, but this episode's dropping tomorrow on Tuesday. But Vernon, checking in. What's good, man? How are you?
Doing well, man. Doing well. We actually had a fun weekend. We actually on Sunday flew out Sunday morning, went and watched Chiefs Bills, and flew back home Sunday night. Um,
Nice.
it was it was fun just being in a different environment. We have Cowboy season tickets, so that's
Right.
kind of corporate. That's kind of corporate football. But then you go into football country, and it was a unique experience. So I love football, and it was a crazy weekend in football. That's for sure.
Yeah, it was. I think there was at least for the 1 o'clocks, I want to say it was like 5 of 8 games had the underdog winning outright,
Yeah,
including the Jets had a great dub over the Packers, the Giants over um,
the Ravens.
the Ravens. That was a good one. Man, the Ravens this year, they're close to being 6-0. They've lost by combined like 9 points or something like that.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's been, I think they've had the lead in all three losses and a
hmm
decent lead in all three losses. So that's been a wild ride for those guys. Pretty crazy to see in general, not just the Jets and the Giants, but how strong New York sports are right now in a world where, like, I think Boston dominated for a while. Boston had like
Yeah.
a decade-long run of just dominating. Philly's on the brink right now. You got the Phillies advancing. The Eagles are 6-0. But I mean, Jets are 4-2. Giants are 5-1. My Knicks look good in the preseason. The Nets have high expectations and a ton of talent. I think the Rangers are the favorites to win the cup, or were the favorites before the season to win the cup. Um, I mean, the Yankees are, as of this minute, game five is in about 3 hours or so, but Yankees still in the mix, making strides. The Mets had a great regular season, came to an unfortunate end early for them, but
Yeah.
New York sports are kind of back. What do you think?
It's a good time to be in New York if you're a sports fan. Uh, but yeah, I think anytime New York is in the playoffs or teams are playing well, it's great for whatever sport that is. Like it's always been that way. You need the city of New York and the teams that are there to be successful. When that happens, the market's bigger. That's the
Yeah.
nature of the beast. Like you
I,
said, Boston was for a while, but didn't have the same impact as New York, in my opinion.
yeah. Yeah, I'm also, and I clearly have a bias because my teams that I grew up loving kind of fall into this, but I'm a pretty big believer that sports are better when the either major market or the iconic teams are good. So, for example,
hmm
I think the NFL is better when the Cowboys are good. I
Yeah,
think basketball is better when the Lakers are good, the Knicks are good. You know, I think baseball's better when the Yankees are good. Again, bias being in that New Jersey, New York area my whole life. But it's kind of what you're saying. And I think Dallas, like when the Niners are good, the Cowboys are good, the Steelers are good. I think football's better personally, and sports in general.
yeah.
So I think we're saying the same thing here,
Oh yeah, it's those household names. I mean, I think that's the biggest
right?
thing. It's you have symbols and logos that are synonymous with winning,
Sure.
and which is nearly impossible to do in today's sports. But the Yankees are the Yankees for a reason. There's that NY is special and it always has been. But it was weird the first time I put on the pinstripes and the expectation of winning was just different than any other uniform. It's because of the history and the success that
Right.
they've had year in and year out. And it's something that not too many sports franchises can say that about their organization.
To that point, our guy Harrison Bader, I think, has done a tremendous job embracing that. Right. As I think about,
Yeah.
we had a bunch of clients make the playoffs, and of course we're rooting for all of them. But I think out of the group of a little less than 10 that made the playoffs, I think that Harrison's obviously made the biggest impact so far.
Mhm.
I saw some crazy stat that's like him and Mantle and one other Yankee, um, in terms of I think 3 homers in their first 4 playoff games. And the other thing that I'll say, and I talked a little bit with Harrison about this, and I'm mostly leaving him alone during the playoff run. He had an added layer, in my opinion, to deal with, in the sense that this is a kid that went to high school in the Bronx. He went to high school in the Bronx. He's from Westchester, 15 minutes north of the stadium. That's even another layer in terms of the pressure and what comes with it. And it's been pretty dope to see him thrive on the stage.
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably helps him knowing what that environment is.
Mm,
If you know it, you're familiar with it, and not necessarily prepared for it when you put the pinstripes on, but you know what that feeling is like. You can embrace it. You it almost can take your game to another level. And for him to go from St. Louis, which is obviously a big baseball place, like
yep.
they love their Cardinals there, to a fan base in New York that is as crazy as they get, as passionate as they get, as knowledgeable as they get. Uh, it's good to see him doing what he's capable of doing, especially coming off an injury too. It's like
Right. Yeah.
it's fun to watch.
Getting
Hmm.
traded, coming off the injury. He stepped up big time. So, excited for him tonight. Excited for our guy James Karinchak as well on the
Yeah,
Guardians. May the best team move on to the next round.
yeah.
Um,
Hopefully
Pivoting
they're not facing each
quickly.
other late in the game.
Yeah, I mean that's a funny thing. I'll talk about that for a second. Like that dynamic of the heads up aspect of baseball, you get it less commonly in football, but corner slash receiver, that happens.
Right.
Um, that's that's tough to watch on our side. Yeah, if it's, I don't even want to speak it to an existence. I'd rather it just kind of avoid that situation, frankly. But yeah, agreed. Hopefully we don't have to see that tonight. But if it does, they'll go mano a mano, and the result will be the result. It's up to them.
Exactly. Yep.
Pivoting to the NFT space, and then we'll jump into our guests for this week. Wanted to talk quickly. It's a little bit past the hype cycle of it, which makes it maybe even a better time to talk about it. There was buzz around the SEC looking into Yuga. I obviously don't know the details, but what I will say is that um, I, globally speaking, without knowing anything behind the scenes, I see it as a net positive for the space. I'm a big believer that the faster we can get to guidance and understanding of what the rules and the regulations and the laws will be, and I understand that Web3 and the ethos of the decentralized internet is to not deal with laws and to have it be autonomous and decentralized. But I think realistically, at least in America, um, I don't think we're going to get a 100% version of that. I think it's utopian to think that way, being a little
Hmm.
idealistic. So I see it as a positive. I think it accelerates the information that we need as an industry. I'm certainly looking at what the SEC has to say about whether it's Yuga or other projects that come. But I see it as a positive. I know there was some negative sentiment around it, but I'm just kind of going on the record that this was inevitable. I think anybody that didn't think that the SEC was going to have their eye on an industry that's transacting billions globally,
Right.
again, is being naive and utopian. So that's where I said I'm curious, from your perspective, how you see it.
Yeah, I kind of have the same sentiment. It's it's just a matter of time. Like you have an industry that is still young, and like you said, billions of dollars going through it. You have to have some things in place so the broader community can actually get involved and feel comfortable getting involved. And I think for a lot of people, it's the rules, it's the regulations, it's a lot of those things that lend towards traditional things, because they know where it's coming from. They know they have a feel of more control. And for people who are with their money and not having as what they feel is not as much control into things, they're not really going to fully dive into it. So yeah, I think it's great. I think it's only going to help things continue to grow in the right direction.
For sure. Last thing I'll just say quickly before we bring on our guests. I know within the Vayner Sports Pass universe, the black card auction, at least the primary auction, is concluded. Everybody knows, I think, what's next in terms of wild card games. So just let everybody know that wild card games a big focus right now. We expect to come live here, I would say, in less than 30 days. I think early to mid-November is when the wild card game will start. So super excited for that. Be on the lookout for more on that front. And then without further ado, excited to welcome our guests, John and Karel from the Treasure DAO. Excited about this combo coming up here. So let's get to it. Hey, John, Karel, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, ditto.
Absolutely. So let's just start. I think it's always good to give the audience kind of just a baseline. If each of you kind of just give us a quick background on you, and then maybe each of you can give a point of view on the things that you're working on and a background on that. Does that work? John, why don't you kick us off? You're on my left.
I'm John Patten. I co-founded Treasure last fall. I've worked in crypto for the last few years as a developer and growth person. And now focus fully on NFTs.
Awesome. Karel Vuong, co-founder and head of ops at Treasure, came into this more from the VC lens. So spent a lot of time being hands-on with companies, on kind of the investment side, all the way through to helping stand them up. Background also in kind of building as well. Great to get my hands dirty, and spending a lot of my time at Treasure, just everything kind of ops, partnerships, growing the team, scaling, turning this thing into something massive.
Awesome. And on that front, so can you give everybody a little bit of background on what Treasure is and all the components that go into Treasure? Because I know it's multifaceted.
Yeah, we started last fall. I launched the project in the middle of the night, not expecting anything. I probably spent an hour on it with just this idea of these projects were emerging that wanted to create these game worlds really organically and use the community to build out all the features of it. And so we approached it and said, economies will be really important. And it'd be very interesting if there were a lot of games that all shared the same economy, like treasures and using NFTs as forms of money. And over time, as the community showed up, we started realizing that this could be a platform. And I kind of think of it like a theme park experience now. We want to build something where it's so immersive, and you come in and you start using NFTs, you have your character, and you're part of this world, and the blockchain isn't even there. It's just the ability to fully experience the story and co-create it. So over time, we were a free mint project. We started generating a lot of revenue through royalties, which we were able to divest. And now we've brought in established game builders, which we can talk about later. So we've just taken this really small vision of a community co-creating a game world, and now we're trying to build it into something that rivals the traditional game publishers.
Nice. Can you, as far as the Treasure ecosystem, is it fair to say that like Small Brains and Smalls are the leading aspect of that economy and that industry?
I think so. I'm biased. I love the Smalls, but it is like a very varied ecosystem. And we're trying to make something where everyone finds a character that resonates with them. In Marvel and Disney, there's just so much breadth to the identities there. And for me, it's Smalls, but there's other projects that captivate people more.
What are some of those projects? What are some? Because I'm only, I think, in your ecosystem familiar with Small and like the other components of Small. What are some of the other ones?
So the first project we started with was called Bridge World, and this is sort of an on-chain, almost kind of like D&D game. So it's much more, it's much grittier, dustier, and it's where Smalls is sort of, the goal is just to have fun and be in a community, celebrating common values. Bridge World is more like an MMORPG where it's very adversarial and people form guilds strategically. But then we just started with these two projects of our own, sort of to just seed the idea of, hey, you can use this magic token and it can sit across a lot of worlds. And then a bunch of games started coming in. Karel can speak to that. He runs the partnership wing of Treasury.
I think just to add, I think with with Bridge World and really, I think the broader kind of like portfolio of games we have, a lot of it is, kind of like, we're really kind of building this like decentralized game console or Nintendo, as John mentioned. You have a bit of flavors for everybody, in the same way that kind of Marvel or Disney has different character sets and sets of IP. And so I think Smolverse being one of them, Bridge World being another. We have, and these are the ones that we kind of created really to like start everything off at Treasure. It was our kind of proofs of concepts and really to bootstrap and see if the kind of thesis that we had initially was going to kind of pick up wind. And so had some really strong traction there. I think part of the really why we exist now is like, how do we then invite the community and, a broader ecosystem to kind of build on top of Treasure. And so, we have a ton of games, that are forming, a lot that, haven't yet been announced. A few others, folks like Tales of Lyria, they're building kind of like a 3D RPG kind of game as well. We have Knights of the Ether. They're building kind of like a Slay the Spire, kind of like deck building game, super awesome kind of, work that they're doing there. The Beacon is another one. So it's really kind of moving towards this, again, like very diversified set. We want there to be something that anyone can pick up. And then eventually, as this ecosystem continues to grow over time, really building something that like, oh, well, if you really enjoy a genre, you can go deep and you can try and experience, a lot of different games that, that kind of sit underneath Treasure.
Wow. This one's kind of unique for our podcast because we mainly had artists on here. Like this is, I'm sitting here just trying to absorb all this because this is to start to understand how deep it is and everything that goes into Treasure. This is next level. This is fun to kind of just listen to two men who are just dialed into what they're doing. Karel, for you, like going from what traditional VC stuff to getting into this space, like what are some of the challenges? What are some of the things that you've kind of just had to just navigate through that's like comparing the two?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the first and foremost, kind of building in the open. I mean, Treasure in a lot of ways like operates as a DAO. And, from our starting point, it was very much, kind of going from the ground up. You kind of start off with like very opinionated and very public kind of, folks who have a lot to add and have a lot to say. And I think in a lot of ways, also inject a lot of life into the project. It's not something that if you go back to kind of Web 2, it's very much, it's your boardroom, it's your investors, it's your kind of executives within that single organization. And maybe you have some advisors kind of helping out. But you kind of flip that entire model on its head, once you go into kind of Web 3 and certainly what we're doing. And then I think the other part of it, which I personally really liked was, our approach, you kind of have a portfolio to support, and it's very similar to, I think, if you're in VC or if you're an investor overall, you have a bunch of babies who you try to give a lot of love to. And in our case, it's, the games that we're kind of partnering with and that we're building. So there are a lot of, I'd say, similarities from that lens, but I think in a lot of ways that bottom-up approach really adds I think a different flavor, a lot of different kind of folks to be accountable for. And then also, the kind of ownership that is like a huge part of, just like NFTs, huge part of gaming, whether it's the kind of NFTs themselves that, can give you a opportunity. Of course, you're a bit kind of, more invested, but also, how we're kind of creating it all, is centralized around Magic, our token. And so anyone who owns that also has a say in really kind of how everything is governed, how we do things. And, it's also used as the kind of, token that allows you to, enjoy and play the games that we're building.
Karel, you touched on something that we've talked about before on the pod, and I've talked about before, the fact that like Web 2 versus Web 3, you're building in the open. I'd be curious to hear from you two pros of that and cons of that from your perspective and your experience.
I'll let John jump in.
No, go for it. Go for it, Karel.
Yeah, I mean, I think pros is, like there's a ton of them, right? And I think, you in a lot of ways it's hard, I think, to electrify the people in the community, in the same way that you can do in Web3. And the fact that everyone feels like they're truly kind of part of something, they can contribute, and it all kind of ultimately goes down to, I think, how like the maybe core team needs to establish a lot of trust and needs to establish kind of like the right foundation to really like get the most out of it. And so, everything in terms of like contributing to, for us, like, creating the game worlds or the IP or the stories that are tied to everything, or, being able to kind of impact those decisions, or also kind of take matters into your own hands. So if you want to, market with us, or if you want to build, games or tools or infrastructure with us, I think that's a huge boon that you can't really do in Web 2, right? And, unless you're part of the employee base, or if you're somewhat invested in some way. I mean, you often kind of do this on a volunteer basis, and you kind of see this kind of happen, right? But it's nothing that it ends up being more kind of fan fiction or just volunteer work, and that doesn't really get codified into kind of the makeup of whatever it is you're doing. And so I think that's a huge part of it. I think the flip side to that is like it can be distracting, right? And so to kind of build a product and do what you're doing as a kind of core team, that in a lot of ways you're trying to do that for the benefit of the entire kind of DAO and the community. And then of course at the same time you have to kind of be present in the community, right? And so it's kind of a double-edged sword, and there's a lot of people to try to make happy, and ultimately it's hard to do that across the board.
John, what would you add on to that?
I definitely agree. The number of stakeholders and their varied interests, it makes it a lot harder to do it. Just speaking personally too, the first year of the project was, we started as this really just a middle of the night hobby thing, and then like within 6 months it was valued at like 3 billion, and we had all these things. Our team had grown to like a couple dozen people, and it's pretty disorienting when, so for your viewers' sake, there's these things in crypto called decentralized autonomous organizations. And basically it's like, if a group of people want to control a common treasury, and not one person is controlling the purse, it's the group. The DAO lets you vote through governance to disperse it. And it's just kind of how you can grow an organization where people are meeting randomly on the internet and freely joining and leaving. And the smart contract is kind of handling all of the management of it. So this is something that's only 2 or 3 years old, and the DAOs that are actually building products are growing, are just now beginning to build their first products. And no one really knows like what a DAO means. How horizontal should the leadership be? Should there be one core mission that the leader is communicating down the chain? And so we came in with this vision of, okay, we want to create this platform where a lot of people can build their own imaginations on top of. So finding the line between, actually this is kind of inconsistent with what we're trying to do as a platform versus allowing all of that was like really difficult, and we're still learning how to do that. I imagine and most people in DAOs would say the same thing in crypto right now.
Makes a ton of sense. Pivoting topics a little bit, something I wanted to ask you guys about, because transparently, it's something that I've been analyzing and contemplating for our own project for a while, is the concept of staking. I'd love to hear how you guys look at staking. I know Small has staking. Would be curious how you see it, and I think it'd just be good for our audience, given that we've talked about staking for the sports pass. It'd be good to hear from a project that's already utilizing it and what they think is, the benefit and where the opportunities are, and maybe lessons learned.
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, we had this kind of goofy idea where you've got this picture of a monkey and its head is really small. If you stake it in school to learn all day, its IQ goes up, and for every 50 IQ points, its head would get a little larger. So staking was, kind of the mechanism that propelled it. And for us, if we had a more sophisticated mechanism of like making everyone cooperate to make the world advance because their land got more sophisticated, the smarter they were, we'd probably use it. Like staking itself is really valuable in crypto if you can use it in a way to like demonstrate people who aren't just speculating on the asset, but they've actually been in the community putting in time. And that's one way you can track that, along with other more qualitative things like, okay, he made a good point over there, and so we'll credit him with something. But staking is very like an automated way of tracking who's been here and like contributing.
Karel, what do you think?
Yeah, definitely echo that. I mean, it's kind of, putting your money where your mouth is, and kind of committing something that, is kind of understood. And I think for us, like, we have used it in a way that, kind of supports the game, the games that we're kind of building. And it's not just kind of Smolverse and small brains. Like, we have Bridge World who's doing it. You have to stake something. They got to go on a quest. They got to come back and bring some items back with them, and and then a whole bunch of other kind of use cases around that. So I think it's definitely a common kind of like mechanism that's kind of used across the board. I think there's, and we'll kind of see how that evolves over time. And you're seeing a bit of a shift into maybe it's a combination of that, and then in order to kind of like unlock the ability for you to play a game or experience something, that might be a bit more akin to kind of like a traditional, like true kind of gaming experience. Maybe you'll have to stake your item in order to kind of access that, right? And so I think it's going to be part of the course, and we're big kind of proponents of it.
Yeah, go ahead. You're good.
Oh no, sorry. Oh, it
No.
Occurred to me. I was going to say, so a lot of like crypto native people, when they look at NFT staking, they're like, this isn't the point of staking, because normally when you stake an asset, there's a consequence to it's your collateral, like your reputation on the line. So if you're validating the network and you approve a malicious transaction, or you are the malicious actor, you get slashed. So there's a bunch of cool stuff we can do in NFTs where it's like, I'm putting, as Karel said, putting my money where my mouth is. If that's staking on a particular person, so like reputational based systems, or just things where it isn't just passively putting your asset there, but there are consequences when you put your name out there, and you abuse that.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I'm not the most knowledgeable in the space. I've kind of gotten my education through AJ and through just time spending with different people on this podcast, and doing research after each one of them, and hearing staking and hearing DAOs and hearing things that are kind of those buzzwords in the community of like, okay, I need to learn more about these things. So let's go back to the beginning. And how you said you had an idea one night, or you had an idea and you executed in a night. How did you manage when it actually started to blow up that fast? How do you navigate that process of kind of really trying to not necessarily hit the brakes, but truly understand the value that you built in such a short period of time? And then how did you make that just continue to grow? Like, I don't think people understand how difficult that is, and how the process and the responsibility of what comes along with that. How did you and your team manage that process, and how difficult was it really?
It was I mean, you've lived in the public eye like much more than we have or will. So like in our little niche or whatever, we were thrust into that eye, and it is hard to like scale, because on one hand, it would have been better if we went slower and did fewer things, but we're all really convinced that like, the next Disney, like, if it doesn't exist, it will in the next couple of years. And the scale of what they're accomplishing or will accomplish will be so massive. There'll be so many product verticals, and the nuances on how users engage with these platforms. They'll be like little self-sovereign systems, theme parks. And so, yeah, there was that tension, and we could have done it a lot better for sure, where it's like, we need to make each piece perfect, but also there's like a huge vision, and we need to be tackling as much of this as soon as we can.
Yeah, that's impressive, because most people in this world think, okay, there's Disney and they've got the monopoly. They're not going to. There's nothing that's gonna like even eclipse them or even getting anywhere close to them. But then you have individuals like yourselves that are like, no, there's Disney, and then there's something next, and we want to be that next thing. So that's, even for me as an entrepreneur, that's something that inspires me to just continue going down that path of, no, I want to be the next one, which is phenomenal being on this with you guys.
Yeah, I love that. If I can add, I think, if you, and just looking at the gaming space, right, and let's kind of abstract away the Web3 and kind of NFT components. I think with like, you started off with these giants who, were all over desktops, right? And they're building games for desktop, and eventually mobile came, and a lot of these players actually didn't want to kind of touch that because it was way too early, it was unproven, they had a good formula. And then you had these kind of like new mobile game publishers come out, Supercell, right, and a whole bunch of others who kind of created something massive out of that. And eventually, the folks who had created really the kind of incumbent systems on desktop and PC, they eventually kind of came over. And so I think we're kind of seeing that in a way with NFTs. Like, people are, they're paying attention, they're keeping an eye out. But I think the first movers for a lot of folks are, jumping into, really this kind of new wave of, NFTs, Web3 gaming on the blockchain. We're still testing things out, and we're still kind of proving it to see if it really works. But I think in a lot of ways, we, for us especially, like, we have conviction that this is going to be where folks will move. And it's a new medium on top of everything. It'll be applicable on PC, desktop, and mobile, and we're working towards that.
Yep. No, Karel, I love that point, just because I so vividly remember that transition, or not transition, I guess the creation of that mobile gaming market. And I remember the skepticism and the hesitancy from the big publishers, and like you said, Supercell, Zynga. Although Zynga, I guess, was more of like the social media than mobile, so that's even like a different category of the social gaming space. No, but I love that call out, and it's fun for me being 35 now. I remember when I first started my career right out of school, and I was deep into the social media space, I kept hearing people reference like things that happened in the past, and I had no context for it because I was just like in school and doing what I was doing. But now, being 35, seeing the social media era, seeing the mobile era, and now seeing this blockchain era, I finally get to be like, oh yeah, just like when this happened in 09 or when this happened in 12. And so I think that's a great call out. And I haven't really crystallized the gaming perspective that way, so it's great to hear it that way. I appreciate it. One thing that I had down that I wanted to ask you guys about, because I had a nice call with the team from there a couple days ago. Can you talk through, again, going back to when it started, how did you guys land on Arbitrum as the blockchain of choice for this vision?
Yeah, that's a great question. The layer 2 on Ethereum, the scaling debates had just started, and I think Arbitrum had been live maybe a month. And so we were kind of making decisions with a lot of uncertainty. And I think that even what Arbitrum is now at a consensus layer, like how you submit transactions and who can see them, that kind of stuff is going to completely change because this technology is so new. But their team was like very open, willing to help us. They're helping us build things on the side now that we'll get to speak about. But in general, we thought like, okay, if the metaverse is like a story that exists on the internet that you can co-create with other people, you're going to be doing a lot of transactions. And on layer 1, especially during the bull run, and you're sometimes paying $100 to do a transaction, you can't engage actively in the world with someone else. So we wanted to go somewhere where we can do a lot of transactions really cheaply, but it also needs to have the security of Ethereum that NFT collectors depend on. Because the whole to me, the whole joy of NFTs is collecting these things and this is something that's mine. It expresses who I am. And so as soon as you worry that it's going to disappear, then the entire value of NFTs disappears. So Arbitrum is that right middle ground between the speed and security for us.
Makes a ton of sense. And then the next thing I was curious about, I made notes before this, you keep seeing me reference it, because I was excited for this one in particular. Smolverse and gaming. Can you guys go a little bit deeper into that and what you're excited about, what people can maybe expect over the next few months or years in that specific lane?
Yeah, absolutely. We're really excited, and I'm honestly humbled by we're working with this team, Strider DAO, and so Andrew Green has a couple decades experience working at TinyCo and EA, and so we brought in this team who left traditional gaming, and then they want to do Web3 gaming. And their thesis when they came in was not only do you get to own your assets, but the cool thing about Web3 is you can build stuff in the open and the community can contribute to it. So we want to, we linked up with these guys and gals who built like a bunch of successful game franchises, and they're like, now we want to go into Web3 and like do this with a really strong community, which is what they saw us as community leaders. So Smallville is going to take about a year to 18 months to fully develop, but it's all going to be in the Discord with the community, where they weigh in on the lore, the game loops. And so, yeah, they feel like they actually built this product with everyone else. We're really excited about that.
Yeah, just quickly jump in. I feel like we can give them a bit more homage. This team is incredible. Like, they've built games like, Harry Potter, Hogwarts Mystery. They've built GTA San Andreas, Red Dead Redemption, Portal 2. So really, heavy hitters that have kind of come from like, really esteemed kind of backgrounds in the space. And I think importantly, like how we kind of see it and where they've kind of aligned is like, the whole motto behind game publishing is broken, right? It's like, it's these walled gardens. What this entire space represents is going back to the whole ownership piece, right? And so being able to take matters into your own hands as a player, as a gamer, being able to control where everything goes, this is, and what we've kind of been framing this and kind of building around is like, what we're ultimately doing now is like building a game is now a game in itself, right? And so you have, all these different elements where, as a community, you can get really involved. You can kind of go along that path, dictate the story. Of course, the folks that are kind of building the game, like, they're gonna, continue to kind of direct and, kind of call the shots. But it's really in kind of close collaboration with the players. It's almost the reverse of how you would kind of do it in the traditional kind of way. And so we're super excited about that.
Nice. I wish I was a gamer. I never really got into gaming for some reason. I guess I was just too busy trying to hit a baseball. I don't know. But a lot of my teammates were gamers. But this makes me want to dive into a little bit more. So obviously, given the market and where things are right now, and everybody, obviously, skeptics always want to point to the negatives. But for you guys, did it force you guys to have to pivot at all, or even dig in deeper and go even harder? Like, what was your kind of mindset? And I'm assuming I know the answer to this based off of just the space you got into and wanting to be the best at it. I can probably assume what that answer is, but I'd love to hear how you guys went about that.
Yeah, I mean, we're still learning what we don't know. There was we had like unbounded ambition and optimism at the beginning, and then it's like, okay, game design is very difficult, and we're learning this with experts, and we are like novices to some extent in this, but the things we are experts in, like, we think that we can help gaming like be something that hasn't really existed before. And like a couple examples would be, so I come from a decentralized finance background, which is all about building protocols to just efficiently swap assets. And if we want to make like game worlds and metaverses that can people be in really actively, then you shouldn't just be switching around Bitcoin. You should just be using these cool looking NFTs and lots of them and like passing them around. And we know how to build things like that, which is the value of is experiential and not financed. And there'll be a lot of game companies that come in and build things with NFTs, but like, we love NFTs. We understand like what people, why they want to collect them, because we do that stuff, and the joy and imagination of them. We're not experts in game design, but in terms of just like sheer love of NFTs and understanding what makes markets tick, like that's what we're good at. So we're just we're becoming experts in things we weren't at the beginning.
Nice.
Yeah. If I can just really quickly add, I think we're so early in the space too, and I think with the bear market, we've seen a lot of folks who may have been a bit more financially motivated and kind of driven by speculation kind of rotate out, and what's been left behind are really the folks who are kind of here to really enjoy and kind of really innovate with us, right? And I think a lot of those kind of learnings that we've developed over time and just kind of building, we're it's really no different, right? Like, we're still super heads down, we're still kind of grinding away, and I think we're getting everything ready for the next wave, and everything we've been doing between raising some more capital to just making it a lot easier for anyone to get Magic and get onto Treasure. Being a one step removed from kind of, Ethereum, there's a bit more friction, but it's all about making, things as easy as possible. And also the other side of it is like, let's get all the greatest kind of builders here. Let's get all the games that are, kind of doing really cool stuff, and let's create, some really delightful experiences that people can kind of jump in with and start enjoying themselves. Because at the end of the day, that's what everything's about.
Awesome. Well, good stuff. I'm a big fan of what you guys are up to. I'm really glad we could get the four of us to chat here. Mm-hmm. And where, just to leave it off for anybody that's learning about you guys for the first time, where do you think is the best place for people to keep tabs? Is it your Twitter? Is it your Discord? Where should people go?
Yeah, definitely. Twitter would be a good spot. So twitter.com/treasure_DAO. And then there should be a link to bring you to everything. But between that, awesome. Discord, and that's a good place to start.
Cool. Well, Karel, John, appreciate you guys joining us today. This was a lot of fun, exciting. Like Vernon said, it was nice to have a different type of guest in the NFT space. Most have been either project mostly on the creative side. So the fact that you guys are on the more technical side, I think, is a nice change of pace. And again, appreciate you guys coming today.
Yeah, thanks for having us. And just for your viewers, Gary and AJ put us on the map, really. Like Gary's tweet on New Year's Day.
Really. Well,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's awesome to hear. Well, then that means in turn, I feel like I put you guys on the map because I'm the one that introduced Gary to y'all. So I'm going to take the credit. I appreciate the shout out and appreciate you guys and look forward to staying in touch and talking more.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Going Deep. To learn more about Vayner Sports Pass, please follow us on Twitter @VSPass. Also, don't forget to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts and make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel.